What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the pod, episode 22 of the Offsetting Penalties Podcast. I appreciate everyone that's here, and I am so excited to be here recording this podcast today because I'm recording this on Wednesday night. That means 3 nights from when I'm recording this, I'll be watching Violence for the first time in 6 weeks. I hope you guys are as excited as I am. The 6-week off season for the UFC, this is a football podcast too, as everyone knows. And the offseason for football takes an eternity. It's 6-7 months, no joke intended. And the UFC, it's only 6 weeks. But this year was 6 weeks. Usually it's less. But it feels like an eternity, man, because this is such a staple of, it becomes a staple of my week-to-week schedule, just putting aside time to watch the fights on Saturday, And I'm so excited that it's back. And we're back with a little bit, it's a little different now. No more ESPN. It's Paramount now. Paramount CBS is the new home of the UFC, and I've been talking about that on this podcast, counting down the broadcast, and, we're here. We don't have to pay for this card, and I will say this card is phenomenal. Just awesome fights. There's no real title fights, right? Obviously an interim title fight at the top of the card. The rest of the card, very solid fights, but there's no real title fights. So to me, it kind of feels like just a really juiced fight night card. Right? When it lost Kayla, Amanda, and I know some people that didn't really move the needle for them when it lost that fight, but when Kayla got hurt, that was a fight I was looking forward to a lot. I'm a big Kayla Harrison fan. Amanda Nunes is the go to women's MMA. And when it lost that, it kind of took away from the prestige of this card almost. And then you just look at it, and I'm doing my notes for this podcast, and I'm just like banger, 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 banger. And it's awesome. And, maybe it feels a little bit like a glorified fight night, but I don't care because I don't have to pay $80 to watch it, or I don't have to hook up my illegal stream on Stream East or whatever I use for said pay-per-view. It's not pay-per-views anymore. They're just numbered cards. So I'm over the moon. This is going to be, I really do think, I've been talking to people about this, this is going to be the start of the UFC taking another step towards being mainstream. Because as awesome as the sport is, right, it's been kind of gatekept for a while, and it's been gatekept behind the paywall of having to pay. You want to watch championship fights, you got to pay $80 for a pay-per-view. Oh, but if you do it more than a week in advance, you get to pay $70. Woo! There's none of that anymore. At least I hope there's not. I hope it's like this permanently. So we're here, Paramount Plus, new start time on the card this weekend, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, instead of the normal 7:10 that we were normally used to, which I like. It means I don't have to record this podcast after the fights at 11 p.m., midnight-ish. And speaking of that, I will jump into the card in a sec. I do want to say, I'm a YouTuber now, basically. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Follow Offsetting Penalties on Instagram, on TikTok, on Spotify. We're everywhere. We're growing, doing more and more collabs. Obviously, the Monday NFL recaps with Game Time Gretch. Some more stuff in the works. And let's get straight into this card because Paramount Plus, first card of the year. And it was announced. A lot of people thought it would be Ilya. Ilya's taking a little break, although now he's saying he's going to be back in April or May or whatever it is. But he'll be fighting the winner of this fight for the undisputed belt, for the interim lightweight championship of the world. Justin Gaethje, Paddy Pimblett. Paddy is a ever so slight favorite in this one. And honestly, I'm going to talk in depth about 6 fights on this podcast, and then, I'll mention the other ones very briefly. This is of the primary 6 fights. This is the hardest one. I think this is the biggest coin flip of them all. Maybe there's a heavyweight fight that I'll talk about in a bit that, it's heavyweight MMA. But there's a lot of lopsided odds in this one. And the fact that we've got a minus 180 favorite, a very slight favorite, not even a 2-1 favorite, shows that this is great matchmaking. And honestly, I really do believe this is great matchmaking. I just thought, as many other people did, that Arman Tsarukyan should have been fighting Ilya, right, for the belt, and then the winner of this fight, not for an interim title, just this is a number 1 contender fight, would go on to fight the winner of Ilya Arman. Obviously, that's not the case, right? We're here and we're talking about interim championship of the world. The UFC hates Arman, and I kind of feel bad for the guy, but also, he's the one who punched a fan on the walkout, headbutted Dan Hooker. He can't keep himself from getting out of trouble. So, for the UFC's sake, they don't want to reward behavior like that. I kind of understand it, but I also, no one is saying that Arman is the most deserving fighter but it's like the human being and all the extra baggage that comes with it. He's already ruined one pay-per-view last year, the January card against Islam. So, I kind of understand it, but this isn't about Arman. This is about Gaethje and Patty. Really fun, stylistic matchup. I think most people are going to look at it and go striker Gaethje, grappler Patty. And, I do understand that, right? Because, Gaethje grappling isn't his thing. In his fight in March against Fiziev, that was the first ever takedown he'd ever attempted in the UFC. And this is a guy that comes from a wrestling background, funny enough. And obviously Patty has, high level jiu-jitsu. Like, it is legit ground game. And, that makes it, a stylistic matchup, of course. But I think, people go back to Khabib and Charles, right? And they look at Justin and be like, oh, his grappling is horrible. And it's like, no, he's actually not a bad anti-grappler. But of course, it's the fact that, he fought Khabib and Charles. And let's be real, none of the people who fought Khabib and Charles beat Khabib and Charles, right? They didn't. So, you kind of want to look and be like, does he have good grappling? Does he not? I think this is going to be a good litmus test for Justin Gaethje, right? Because I think Paddy Pimblett, as good of a grappler as he is, and who knows, maybe 3-4 years from now we'll look back at and say, yeah, Paddy's jiu-jitsu is cream of the crop, best in the UFC. But, Justin Gaethje has been in the cage with Charles, and he had Charles hurt. Everyone's had Charles hurt in any fight that they fought against Charles. And, he ended up getting choked out. Charles is the best jiu-jitsu practitioner in the UFC. Is Paddy on that level? I think most people, you'd ask them that question and they'd say, no, probably not. But that's what makes this fight intriguing, is because it's like Paddy and the Paddy truthers do believe that he's that good of a grappler. And, if he can find a way to put away Justin in this matchup, on the ground with a submission, as we know, Paddy's triangles are really, really good. That's what he got Bobby Green with. We're there. Right, but I also don't. I think people are overlooking the anti-grappling skills of Gaethje a little bit, and I also think people are overlooking Paddy's striking. Like, Paddy was beating up Michael Chandler on the feet. Now, it's Michael Chandler, right? We know this, but he split him open with a beautifully timed knee. Paddy has sneaky good calf kicks. They don't look like they generate enough power. They almost kind of look like he's throwing a wet sock when he kicks you with his leg, but they're effective, right? They've been effective in all his fights. They bruise up his opponent's legs. So, I think both guys obviously have their strong points of their games, but I think that the other part of their game, all the MMA fans and all the analysts are kind of overlooking those. And I think what will end up happening on this one is, normally when you have very similar skilled fighters, the fight ends up being on the feet most of the time, just because MMA, you start on the feet. Every round you start standing up. And, that would lean Gaethje's way. But I do worry about the activity of Justin Gaethje. Now, Paddy's not the most active fighter either. Let's not act like he's fighting twice a year either. But obviously, Gaethje got viciously KO'd by Holloway back in April of 2024. That was UFC 300. And then he takes 11 months off and fights on the March card last year against Fiziev, right? And it was originally supposed to be Dan Hooker. Fiziev, on short notice, a guy he'd already beaten, was a favorable matchup for Gaethje, who was already in camp for that fight. And it was favorable in the aspect that, he beat the dude before. And it was a 2-3, it was a 2-1 decision to Gaethje, right? It was a weird grappling first round with Fiziev, and then rounds 2 and 3, it was Gaethje winning on the feet. He knocked him down with a beautiful uppercut. The power's still there, but point being, we're at January now. So we're looking at almost, 36 months. Am I doing that math right? Or 24 months? 2 years, right? We're looking at around a 2-year time frame, and it's like he's fighting once a year. He's fighting every 10 months, 11 months, right? So you don't love that, especially for a guy that's getting up there in age, right? To be fair, though, Paddy, his last fight was against Chandler, and that was the pay-per-view after Gaethje fought in Vegas. It was the Miami pay-per-view last year. He was the co-main against Chandler. And you know what? He thoroughly beat up Michael Chandler in that one. And if you want to MMA math it, Charles Oliveira took in the more recent matchup, took Michael Chandler to a decision and beat him, and then Patty TKO'd Michael Chandler. So you're like, is Patty better than Charles, which would mean he would win this? But as we know, MMA math doesn't always work that way. I'm doing all this rambling basically to get the point across. I think this is such an even matchup. This is such a coin flip in my eyes, but I really do think I'm slightly leaning Patty here, and I think it's the lack of activity for Justin Gaethje. That's going to be more of an issue for Gaethje being at an older age, already talking about, retiring potentially soon. That's not always a great thing that fighters do when they already have like a retirement date set in their head. I think Patty's the younger fighter. He's a more athletic fighter. And yeah, Gaethje has the power advantage, but I think Patty's striking is good enough to hold his own. And it really comes down to how defensively sound is Paddy Pimblett, right? Gaethje will move forward. Gaethje will try and crush his legs because he throws leg kicks like he's swinging a baseball bat. So, it's Paddy, can you stay defensively sound and find your openings? And from what we've seen, every time Paddy has fought a step up in competition, there's always the people who say it's too much. He hasn't fought anyone. He's only fought old people. And we've been saying that for some time now. And now, we're here. And people want to talk about Tony Ferguson and how old losing streak Tony Ferguson, was like beating up Paddy just a little bit, even though Paddy handedly won that fight. I understand that. I get that. But that was what, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, however long ago that was that he beat Tony Ferguson. He's a young fighter who's growing into his own, so he's going to improve. People think that the same fighter from December of 2023 is going to be the same fighter in January of 2026. That's not the case. I think Paddy Pimblett's younger. His career is on an ascension, while Justin Gaethje is on his way out. And honestly, there's no shame in that, right? He has been a legend. He won an interim belt once before. He has knocked out some of the best fighters in the world. He's gone toe-to-toe with some of the best fighters in the world. This isn't a knock on Justin Gaethje. I just think you've got one guy who's kind of on the downswing of his career and another guy who's on the upswing of his career, and that guy would be Paddy Pimblett. So I do lean Paddy in this one. However, I said it was a coin flip, and I truly do mean that. Paddy leaves his chin in the air, and I know Scousers don't get knocked out. That was an okay Scouser accent. That was okay. He says he doesn't get knocked out and Scousers don't get knocked out and all this stuff. But when your chin is in the air and you're fighting a guy like Justin Gaethje who can crack, that does matter, right? And I think Justin Gaethje is like controlled chaos. Michael Chandler is chaos, right? There's no technique to that chaos. With Justin Gaethje, it's controlled chaos, and that's obviously going to present a bigger problem. So we'll see, right? Because going from Tony Ferguson, Bobby Green, Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje, right? That is a clear step up in competition, each rung of the ladder. And each time, Paddy has shown that he improves enough to be able to stay with this level of competition. And from what I've seen, I'm tired of doubting this guy. I doubted him for a while. I just see no reason why he isn't going to continue to improve and beat a guy like Gaethje. So I like Paddy winning this one and setting up an Ilya-Paddy super fight that I guess is a super fight. I'm not sure, but it would make for some good marketing, and CBS/Paramount would make a lot of money off that. So that's my thoughts on this one. I like Paddy, but coin flip, and it's going to be a really, really close one. So that's the main event. Co-main event was supposed to be Kayla Amanda, like I said at the top of the show. It is not. So up comes Sean O'Malley versus Song Yadong. Suga is a 2-1 favorite, minus 200 favorite. Song Yadong comes in as plus 170 underdog. I think this is a fight that makes a lot of sense for both parties. Now, Umar versus Figgy is on the card towards the bottom of the card. I feel like it would have made more sense to do Umar, Suga, and Song Yadong versus Figgy, in my opinion. But that's not the case. And this fight was made a lot earlier than Figgy versus Umar was. At least I think it was. And this is the fight that we've got. Now, Song Yadong is a legit top 6, top 8 bantamweight, right? He's ranked number 5 right now. And I really do like Song Yadong a lot. I do think off the rip, I'm not going to do some big lead up like I did with Gaethje Paddy. I think it's very clear Suga has a clear advantage in this one. And the fact that is he really only a 2-1 favorite? There's no way, man. I guess he is. I disagree with those odds completely. Here we go. Let's go. UFC official. Yeah, he's a 2-1. He's a 2-1 favorite. I have those odds in the lower third, and I was just putting them together. It didn't really register with me. I feel like it should be way more than that. I get it. Sean O'Malley, 2 losses in a row against Merab. He got finished in the more recent one. But as we've known, Merab is a mother effer for anyone to try and deal with. And Sean O'Malley has never lost a striking battle in the UFC. I mean, you could argue the Petr Yan fight, right? You could argue that. I'd have no problem with that argument. But he still held his own in that fight, right? And what Sean O'Malley does so well is when people try to strike him, and we saw this with Cheeto, right? When people try to strike with him and they don't, they fight in his range, he's going to beat you up and he's going to pick you apart. He's too good of a fighter for that. And I also think with this being a 3-round fight, Sean O'Malley doesn't have to do as much of the pacing himself, that sort of thing. I think he can really let his hands fly off the rip. Song Yadong, team alpha male guy, so he does present a takedown threat. Very traditional Uriah Faber, double legs, single legs, nothing flashy, but he does have a takedown game in his arsenal. But neither of these guys are really coming in with momentum. I get it, Song Yadong's coming off of a win, but it was a win in which he eye poked Henry Cejudo, and obviously Cejudo was on the way out of his career. That was last, I think, February or March. That was the UFC Seattle main event from last year. And, I really do respect Song Yadong as a fighter. I think he's a really good fighter, but I think he's not the takedown cardio threat that Merab was for Suga. Right, so I think if Song Yadong does shoot a bunch of takedowns on Suga, as we saw with Merab, right, Suga defended him. Okay, it was just the having to defend him over and over and over and over. I don't think Song Yadong's shooting over and over and over like that because he's a boxer primarily who uses his hands a lot, and then will mix in the wrestling quite a bit, but it's not like his primary skill. That's not like what he's most comfortable doing. So I think that really gives Suga an edge in this one. If Song gets an early takedown and kind of has Sean O'Malley hesitating on his shots. He's not really letting his hands go, letting the weapons go. I could see it, but I just think we've seen this with Sean O'Malley before. When he fights people who can't take him down, he's going to win every time. Because he is, I'm not a big Sean O'Malley guy. He is that good of a striker. He is, right? He's got unbelievable boxing, as we know, great power in his hands, and great footwork. And then he has some really sneaky knees and kicks up the middle, and he uses his range to his advantage, right? With the front kicks, with the knees. And I just think that Sean O'Malley on the feet is by far the more polished, well-rounded striker. And I think this fight will primarily be on the feet because I don't know if I have the confidence. Song Yadong's a good wrestler. I don't know if I have the confidence in Song Yadong to, get these takedowns, as consistently as a guy like Merab was able to do against Sean O'Malley. So I do like Suga in this one. Quick analysis on that one, but, I did spend a long time on Gaethje Patty, and I don't think there's much more to this. It's striker versus striker who kind of wrestles a little bit. That's the way I look at it, and I'm going to take the more polished striker, the longer striker, and the one who, let's face it, he desperately needs a win to get back on track. He's not going to get a title shot if he wins this. I mean, maybe if it's a spectacular knockout or something, he will. But, Sean O'Malley desperately needs a win coming off of 2 losses in a row against Merab. And, Petr Yan is the champ right now. And let's say Petr Yan defeats Merab, in his first title defense. And then Sean O'Malley's able to win one more if he wins this one. Then we're talking, okay, Sean O'Malley back in the title conversation. Petr Yan's a guy who has a win over. I get it. But there's a long way to go, and Sean O'Malley needs to right the ship. And this is the fight to do it. This is good matchmaking for him to do it, and it's good matchmaking for Song Yadong too, because, it's a difficult matchup, but it's an opportunity to climb in the rankings and cement yourself into the title picture, which Song Yadong, frankly, has never been able to do. He's a guy who's never really been able to take out, the elite top bantamweights, right? He beats the guys who are below him in the rankings, but the guys who are in that top 5, top 6, just that he's looking up at, he's never really been able to string together performances like that against those guys. And I do believe that Sean O'Malley is that caliber of a bantamweight where he can stay in the top of the division. So I like Suga in this one. Great fight, great matchmaking, very excited for it. Now let's move on to the big boys. I talked about him a little bit. Waldo Cortez Acosta, number 5 ranked, which is crazy to think that he's number 5, but I'll talk a little bit about him in a sec. Taking on Derek Lewis. Waldo's a giant favorite in this one. These odds make no sense to me either. I thought Suga should have been a much bigger favorite. Waldo, I don't know why he's this big of a favorite, but you kind of do understand the whole, he's got momentum on his side right now. He just does. And, sorry, I'm fixing the hair. The hair is pissing me off, guys. Sorry, I gotta look handsome for the camera. Anyways, Waldo Cortez Acosta is a guy who I have talked about extensively on this podcast. And the reason I have is because I launched this podcast in October, right? I'm recording this January 21st. So we're about 3 months deep of this podcast, right? And most guys that I've talked about with fights have fought once, maybe twice in the 3 or 4 months that I've been podcasting. Waldo Cortez Acosta, this is his third fight. Obviously he fought Ante Delia, the just like weird, Delia, like the weird eye poke thing where Delia eye pokes him and he's like, and then he comes back, knocks him out, he's still holding his eye. And then he turns around really quickly, short notice, UFC Qatar, and knocks out Shamil Gaziev. So this guy's a KO artist. He's a legit heavyweight. He was a guy that a lot of people kind of hated, and it was because of one performance against Robelis Despain, who was, this big hyped up prospect. I'm a Taekwondo black belt, and he had zero grappling. And Waldo Cortez Acosta was like, yeah, I'm going to win this fight, and I'm going to smudge him. And that's what he did. And then everyone's like, oh, he's a boring fighter. And it's like, no, he's always been a pretty entertaining fighter. It's just he's a little bit of a game planner. And I'm watching him fight Shamil Gaziev, who is, not some incredible fighter or anything, but a very, very, very competent, fighter. And he just disposed of him like it was nothing. And from the rip, you could tell Shamil Gaziev didn't belong in that octagon with him. So he's got so much momentum. He's fought so many times. He fought 5 times last calendar year. He went 4-1. He might have fought 6 times. He might have been 5-1. And he fought so many times in a short period of time. The fan base is getting behind him. He's a short notice guy. And this is a big spot for him, right? Because first numbered event, can't call them pay-per-views anymore, first numbered event of the year. He's a guy who's fought so much that the fans are clinging on to him and more casual people know who he is. And this is a great fight because he's fighting Derek Lewis, who has been a mainstay in the heavyweight division forever, is the UFC knockout leader of all time. Everyone loves Derek Lewis, whether it's for the fighting style with all the knockouts and stuff, or it's because of the fact that he's a hilarious dude and he always gives you some post-interview, post-fight moments that are awesome for the internet. This is a fascinating matchup to me, and kind of what it comes down to is it's heavyweight MMA. Who's going to get caught first, right? That's kind of all it comes down to, all right? Because we've seen Derek Lewis get caught before, but we've seen countless times him just, his hands, and he just finds the chin and out like a light. With Derek Lewis, you don't take a shot on the chin and survive it. You just don't, right? Waldo Cortez Acosta has KO power. He does. He did it to Ante Delia. He did to Shamil Gaziev. But he is a little bit more of a volume fighter. And what I mean by that is he does establish his jab early in fights. Is that going to be an issue for Derek Lewis to get around? It might be, right? Derek Lewis isn't exactly like some skilled counterpuncher. He will counterpunch. That's how he got Taliesin Teixeira in his last win. But the way that these odds are made, and Waldo is a 3-1 favorite, it's crazy to me because we've seen Derek Lewis so many times be an underdog, and just because he's got that KO power, you can do your whole, 15-minute breakdown. Derek Lewis usually doesn't make it out of round 1. Maybe he does, but he'll find a way to put you away. So it really comes down to, is Waldo Cortez Acosta an elite heavyweight or not, right? Because Derek Lewis, as great as he is, at least for some time now, hasn't been like an elite heavyweight. Is Waldo Cortez Acosta an elite heavyweight? Because if he is, he'll dispose of Derek Lewis. He won't let the crazy bombs that Derek Lewis throws at him affect him. But if you get into a dogfight with Derek Lewis and he finds your chin, it's over. So it's really hard to do analysis on fights like this because it's heavyweight MMA, and we've seen both these guys just have vicious early knockouts in their recent fights. So, I don't, like if I leaned one way, I would say I'm leaning Derek Lewis slightly despite the odds, just because it's Derek Lewis, and if you're going to strike with him, you better not get caught. And Waldo Cortez Acosta is a good fighter, but I don't consider him this really fundamentally defensively sound fighter. But it's hard to analyze fights like this because it's really going to come down to both guys have such power in their hands, specifically in their right hand. Who gets caught first? That's what it comes down to. And analyzing heavyweight fights like this is so hard to do because that's usually what it comes down to, unless you get like an Almeida, who is very much a grappler and a smudger. But when you get the heavyweights that like throwing down, it's basically who gets touched first. And, I would ever so slightly guess that Jarek Lewis is the one to find the chin first before Waldo does, but you never know. So that's that one. Obviously it's a banger fight. A heavyweight with a bunch of momentum versus one of the mainstays of the heavyweight division, one of the funniest guys in the UFC. So very excited for that one. Let's go to the females. Let's go to the women. Natalia Silva, 4-1 favorite against Rose Namajunas, Thug Rose, who's a 3-1 underdog in this one. Many people, including myself, really thought that Natalia Silva should have had a title shot. And I remember when the 324 card got announced, and I talked about it very briefly on this podcast. I mentioned that Natalia Silva was probably getting the next title shot because Alexa Grasso was booked against Rose Namajunas in this one. And that matchmaking made a lot of sense, I thought. Alexa Grasso drops out. She's now fighting in March against Macy Barber, co-main in Seattle. And Natalia Silva steps in, which didn't make sense because the higher-ranked fighter who's coming off of a win over Alexa Grasso steps in. But this week in the interviews, fight week, Natalia Silva has been talking about how, they promised whoever wins this fight gets a title shot next. And you know what? Props to her, because she probably could have just waited and pouted and been I'm waiting for a title shot, and then maybe eventually gotten it, right? Kind of what Gaethje did, right? Gaethje was I'm not doing anything until I get a title shot, and here he is fighting for the interim title as the main event on this card. Natalia Silva is a really, really talented fighter, and she has one of the most unique styles in the UFC. Very taekwondo, karate. It's so much movement, right? She doesn't care if she's on the back foot, right? It is very much hop, 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 circle the octagon the entire fight. 15 minutes of circling the octagon, and it's these really fast kicks, these really fast counters, and she's got a good snap jab, and it's been just a nightmare for any flyweight in this division to deal with, right? Alexa Grasso, who is a very good boxer, could not touch Natalia Silva when they fought in May because Natalia Silva's movement is so hard to figure out. A fighter like Thug Rose, who will engage in the grappling, right? She will. And a fighter like Thug Rose, who has a coach like not Trevor Whitman anymore. Yikes. If you know, you know. A fighter like Rose Namajunas, who is a good game planner, very clearly comes into fights with game plans, and we'll see. But the problem is, anyone who's fought Natalia Silva's known that the movement is an issue, and they haven't been able to figure it out. And I think Thug Rose has been around for a while. I guess she's still technically in her fighter prime. She's been around for a while, and a big issue for her since she moved to flyweight up from strawweight is in strawweight she always had the length advantage. That's not really as much of a thing in this division, and it might be a little bit against Natalia Silva. She's slightly bigger than Silva, but not by much. So I lean Natalia Silva in this one. I think the odds are correct, 4-1 favorite. I just think the movement is so tricky, and I think women's MMA gets a lot of slack. I get it. But Natalia Silva is one of those fighters that, not just in women's MMA, and the entire organization has a unique style. So I like that they put this on the main card because Natalia Silva is entertaining to watch. She just is. It's movement. It's very, very it's very precise. It's movement, finding these counter shots, jumping into shots, lunging into shots, but it's not the dangerous lunging. It's because it happens so quickly. I really do like Natalia Silva. I think this is a good chance for her to get a name on her resume like Thug Rose, a former champion, and really cement herself to be next for the title and say, hey, Valentina, you haven't, you fought a lot of people, Valentina. You haven't fought someone like me. You haven't fought a style like mine. So I'm very excited for it. I think it's going to be an amazing fight, a fascinating fight. And I think this is a really good opportunity for Natalia Silva. And it's a good opportunity for Thug Rose too, because, hey, if she does pull out a win, obviously I'm doubting her. The odds makers are doubting her. If she does pull out a win, she's going to fight for the title. Now, I know her and Shevchenko are kind of friends, so Thug Rose has talked about how it would be a little weird. She'd have to sit down and talk with Valentina before a title fight. I don't know what that does for the title conversation and all that, but I do know that if she wins, if Natalia Silva was promised a title shot, if she wins, Rose probably was too, and that'll be a big thing in her mind coming into this fight. So fun fight, good women's fight, and I'm excited for it. Now we get to I want to make a joke. I'm not going to, but probably the most violent fight of the card and of the year. And that's crazy that I'm saying that, considering Justin Gaethje is on this card, and Justin Gaethje, every fight he's in is, violent, very, very violent. But Arnold Allen, John Silva comes in as a minus 275 favorite. Arnold Allen obviously has an edge on him in the rankings. It's been a while since Arnold Allen has fought. It really has. What was his? It wasn't Max Holloway. Was it Evloev? It might have been. No, it was Giga Chikadze in Manchester, the Manchester card. Right, that was July of 2024. Right, and now we're in January of 2026. So Arnold Allen, it's been a while, right, and he's been dealing with some injuries, and people have kind of forgotten about him. Arnold Allen is a dog. Arnold Allen is 100% a dog. And if you don't think so, and I know I'm saying that because he's fighting the guy, John Silva, who literally barks like a dog in his fights, but Arnold Allen is an incredible fighter, just incredible. And he's got unbelievable boxing. It's not like precise or anything, but, he brings it. He's on the front foot. He throws hard. He makes it an issue for you. He has pretty good kicks. Not a diverse skill set in terms of the striking, but it's very, very effective. It's very, very fun to watch. And, he beat up Giga Chikadze, and his 2 losses before that were Evloev, who's number 1 ranked in this division, and, a problem for everyone to try and deal with. And he could have won that fight. People forget, that was a really close fight with Evloev. And then before that, it was Max Holloway, and who besides Alexander Volkanovski and Ilia Topuria has beaten Max? Who? And Arnold, Max won that fight, but Arnold, held his own in that fight. It went 5 rounds. Arnold was swinging till the end. But you're facing this guy, John Silva. And I'm a big John Silva fan. I'm a big Fighting Nerds fan. And I think John Silva is the best of the 4 Fighting Nerds. He fought Diego Lopez, and he's got this weird reputation now. And I won't get into it because I don't want YouTube or the people who run YouTube to get me in trouble. If you know, you know. But John Silva, has gotten a lot of hate from the MMA fan base. And, Diego Lopez fight was potentially fight of the year. It was amazing. If I did end up doing my MMA awards podcast for 2025, which I was planning on, I just went home. It never really happened. My fight of the year was going to be Silva versus Lopez, even though it only went 2 rounds. John Silva is an amazing fighter, and he got taken down, beat up, 12-6 elbows all over his forehead. He was bleeding, and it got ugly, and he was still there. And then he was walking Diego Lopez down, walking him down, landing, and he just got too overzealous. And I think that's the thing about John Silva, right, is he's a really smart fighter. You can tell in the fights. He always finds counter shots. He's always getting his timing. He's a really intelligent fighter, and, he's from the Fighting Nerds. That's their whole stick, is how intelligent, the fight IQ and all that. He's got unbelievable timing. He's such a good athlete. But he fights with emotion, right? You see it. He's crying in his press conference, then he's barking, then he's laughing, and his emotions are all over the place. He gets mad. He was so mad at Bryce Mitchell. He's such an emotional fighter. And what happened against Diego Lopez is, okay, I'm landing, and he started getting emotional, like he always does. And except this emotion was excitement, and I'm going to put this guy away. And he was toying with him, and then you can't do that against number 2 in the world, now fighting for a title shot again, Diego Lopez. You just can't. And Diego Lopez caught him with a nasty, just unbelievable spinning elbow along the fence while Diego Lopez was on the back foot. Beautiful shot by Diego, but if John Silva controls his emotions just a tad and stays a little more calculated, he's probably putting away Diego. And it's a miracle. Diego Lopez's chin is unbelievable because it's a miracle. Some of the shots he was eating, front kicks to the chin, 2s down the pipe. Well, it was amazing Diego Lopez was staying in that fight. And, John Silva is an elite fighter in my opinion. And I think that Diego Lopez, if they fought again, I think John Silva beats Diego Lopez. And I really think John Silva is a top 2, top 3 featherweight in the world. And I'm talking all good about him. I really love Arnold Allen. Fun style. I cannot get my directions right, guys. I'm sorry. Arnold Allen, fun style, really cool fighter, really cool dude. You watch any of his interviews, he's hilarious. But Arnold Allen brawls with you. And I think a guy like John Silva, he thrives in that chaos. He finds the counter shots. He's so calculated with his timing. I could see Arnold Allen throwing caution to the wind and getting caught amidst the chaos by John Silva, just how John Silva was caught amidst the chaos against Diego Lopez. Maybe not a spinning elbow. I don't know. John Silva's got spinning elbows. We saw him do it against Drew Dober. So It's an awesome fight because it's just violent. Like, it's not making it 3 rounds at all. Arnold Allen is a little more of a volume puncher, whereas John Silva does have that one-punch KO power. So I think that's another advantage to Silva. It sucks because I think Allen is so fun, and I think it would just be a brutal, brutal pull to have Max Holloway, Evloev, and John Silva as three of his 4 fights. But, I just think that John Silva is that good. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But all the fighting nerds, whenever they lose, we've only seen it once with Prates. But Prates lost. People were talking down on Prates, on his stock. And then all of a sudden he comes back and it's like, he's still that dude. And I think we might see that with John Silva. And, wink, wink to next week. Tune into the pod next week. UFC 325 in Sydney, Australia. His teammate Mauricio Rufy will be on that card as well. And we'll see if Rufy bounces back from his loss against BSD. But I think Silva bounces back in this one. They've got too good of a gym, man. They've got too good of a gym to, lose consecutive fights. And I think John Silva, the only reason he lost against Lopez was he just got caught up in his emotions too much. And I think against a guy like Arnold Allen, who maybe he does, I don't think he has that Diego Lopez spinning elbow, that one strike knockout power in his hands or in his elbows or in his knees or foots, whatever. I don't think he has that in him like Diego Lopez did. And that's what it came down to, was John Silva just got caught by the perfect shot. And does Arnold Allen have the perfect shot? My gut leans no. So give me John Silva in this one. And with just like the emotions tuned down like 5%, I think this is capable of being the featherweight champion of the world. All my friends will call me biased because I love the fighting nerds, but, I've been saying for a while that this guy's the best fighting nerd of the 4, and I think a lot of people agreed until the Diego Lopez, and we're so emotional as MMA fans. You have one loss, and, the world is falling, and then people remind you after one loss, after 2 losses. In this game, I don't know why it's like this in any other sport. Well, I can tell you why, and this will be a little mini rant here. In football, right? A team has a bad week. A team has a bad week, right? 7 days later, they can go make it up. In basketball, you have a bad game, 2 days later, you can go make it up. Baseball, you're playing 3-game series. Yeah, you have a bad series, you can make it up in the next series, whatever it may be. But in this game, these fighters, and obviously it's such a physical sport, and they're putting their lives on the line doing this. There's so much time in between fights that, fighters don't always like it's 4 to 6 to 8, whatever, however many months in between fights. So if a fighter loses one, that's all you have to talk about for 6 months until he fights again. And I think we've seen it time and time again. Fans get too emotional after a loss, right? After a fighter gets knocked out or they lose a decision. And then they come back and they remind you and everyone's back on the bandwagon. And it's like, this game is so everyone has short-term memory, but you got to think long-term sometimes. And I don't even mean long-term like years. I just mean, don't just think about the most recent fight. I think that's the case with this fight, and that's the thing in general. So that's my mini rant over. I got one more fight I want to talk about a little in depth. The featured prelim, Umar Nurmagomedov versus Deiveson Figueiredo. I chuckle because I look at the odds pop up on screen. Minus 1,400 favorite is Umar Nurmagomedov. 1,400. Unbelievably disrespectful to Deiveson Figueiredo, who is, let's be real. Figgy, former champ, power in his hands, great fighter. But I kind of agree with the odds here. I feel bad for Figgy, but let's not act like Figgy isn't like not even a year removed from like a pretty like severe injury against Corey Sandhagen. And he came back and he fought Montel Jackson it's Montel Jackson, right? I think Montel Jackson's a good fighter. He was ranked number 14, 15 at the time. And it was, from the sounds of it, just like the only guy who agreed to go fight in Rio against Figgy. So it's like, okay, Figgy, what are you going to do, bro? What are you going to do? You're going to fight Umar Nurmagomedov, minus 1,400 favorite. It's just, this is going to be a tough fight for Figgy. Umar has only really looked weak, like, in 3 rounds against Merab. And besides that, Umar's looked, unbeatable. Like, frankly, he's looked unbeatable. The wrestling is so good. Mario Batista did catch him, right? Did catch him, and then Umar weathered the storm and came back. And the only concern I have in this fight for Umar Nurmagomedov is that fight was in October, his last fight, right, against Mario Batista. This is a pretty quick turnaround, especially for Dagestani standards. Usually these guys take quite a bit of time, and I understand why he did it. Ramadan's in in not too long, so you try to get one more before Ramadan. But I'm like, okay, that's the only like hesitation. Skill-wise, Umar's got the grappling advantage. He's got the striking advantage. He's got the youth advantage. Like almost every advantage. Umar sometimes is smaller than his opponents. Well, he's about the same size, if not bigger than Figgy. I'm not going to keep the analysis long on this one. I really do like Figgy. He's got power in his hands, and if, cutting weight twice in a short period of time is, bad on Umar's body and he gets caught, then that's what happens. But I just don't see that happening. I think Umar is too good, and I think a win and a finish, which is what I'm predicting here, gets him the title shot against whoever wins between Peter Yan and Merab. And honestly, as big of a Merab fan as I am, I would almost rather see Umar versus Peter Yan instead of Merab versus Peter Yan for the belt. Personally, I just think Umar versus Peter Yan would be such an awesome stylistic matchup, and that would be the perfect fight to put on an Abu Dhabi card. Both guys from Russia, both guys short flight, perfect. You're not forcing someone to fly all the way from the U.S. or anything. So that's my thoughts on that one. And that is, the six big fights. I'm pulling up my phone right now because we have some unbelievable prelims. And, not unbelievable necessarily in the aspect they're competitive prelims. Like, there's some good ones, but, just some, like, really fun fighters. And I think it's very clear, first Paramount card, first card of the year, they really tried to put, like, big names that they're trying to build on this card, right? Waldo Cortez Acosta is one of them. Natalia Silva is one of them. John Silva is another one. If Arnold Allen gets a big win, then he'll be one of them. Umar to solidify himself. And let's talk about Atiba Gauthier, who is a massive, even a bigger favorite against Andrei Pulayev, which Pulayev is kind of the perfect matchmaking for Gauthier because Pulayev is a Russian with very little personality and he strikes. So that's kind of the perfect style for a fan favorite striker, where it's like you don't like feel bad for the guy he's fighting because there's no personality there, and it's a striker, so the grappling won't get tested. We've seen it with Malcolm Wellmaker and stuff. Sometimes these young guys get fraud checked. I just feel like Gauthier is the most hyped prospect in the UFC right now, so he's bound to get fraud checked. But against someone who's going to strike with him, I just don't see that happening. That's a fun fight. Nikita Krylov, who's been knocked out a couple times in a row now. He's fighting Modestas Bukauskas. That's a fun fight at light heavyweight. This fight's awesome. I hate that this fight's getting buried. Alex Perez versus Charles Johnson. You guys, if you know, Charles Johnson is one of the coolest, most badass fighters on the entire roster. He's got the skullet thing going on. He's violent in every single fight that he's in. And his only loss in recent years is against Ramazan Tamirov, who then a couple months later popped for steroids. Probably should have been overturned to a no contest. It's still a loss for Johnson right now, but he's awesome, and he gets to fight up in the rankings against Perez. So that's an awesome fight. Charles Johnson can't miss. I'm telling you, watch Charles Johnson if you can. This dude is so awesome. Michael Johnson versus Alexander Hernandez. Hernandez is on like a KO streak right now, just out of nowhere, having this like revival a little like later into his UFC career. And Michael Johnson, Michael Johnson is awesome, and he's violent in every fight, and he's coming off of a win against Daniel Zellhuber, in which he was a giant underdog in that fight. I predicted that fight, by the way. When I was there for that, I was very much on Michael Johnson's side going into that fight, and it's an interesting. I would lean Alexander Hernandez gets another knockout here, but two guys who are going to strike. It's going to be fun. We got Josh Hokett versus Denzel Freeman. Hokett's like the next Colby Covington, Sean Strickland hybrid. If he wins, you watch for the post-fight press conference. And he's a guy who does throw a lot of ground and pound if he gets you down. Ricky Turcios versus Cameron Sutherman, and then Adam Fugit versus Ty Miller opening up the card. UFC 324. I cannot wait. Sorry if that was unprofessional, me looking down at my phone. Sue me. I'm so excited for this card, guys. It's gonna be awesome, and I'm just excited that UFC's back. And I don't have to pay money for these cards anymore. It's a Paramount Plus subscription that I don't even pay for. It's a family friends that I'm just snaking and using. So, I'm very excited. UFC 324 is gonna be great, and go get your parlays in, go make your bets, go do whatever you need to do, and let's have some fun. Regardless of if you're betting or whatever, like just enjoy that the fights are back. And this podcast, I'll talk a little bit long-term here for a second before I sign off. NFL and UFC podcast, of course. The NFL has Championship Sunday and Super Bowl left for the season. Now, the NFL content will not go away in the offseason. It can, right? Free agency, combine, draft, all of it, I'll be there to cover. But it will take a backseat on this podcast to the UFC because it won't be in season anymore. UFC will be in season. So as we've seen the last 6 weeks, when I've been pumping out content for Offsetting Penalties, it's been NFL stuff because there hasn't been any UFC, and that's been perfect timing because UFC, has been on a hiatus and NFL's been hitting its peak time of year. But now the tides are gonna flip. But we still got 2 more weeks of the NFL season. Well, technically 3, but only 2 more actual weeks of games. And these are gonna be, I hope, the 2 or 3 greatest weeks of this podcast history. I really do. I appreciate all the love that everyone is giving me. We're collaborating with people. We're trying new things. We're evolving. And, it's been doing great. I've been getting a lot of compliments and a lot of praise for the podcast. And that means a lot to me because, as you guys know, this really started as a way for me to just practice talking in front of camera, get more comfortable. And, I really think the way that it's been going, some of the love I've been getting doing this stuff, that this is something that I want to continue doing and try to grow, try to actually, I'm not saying get paid, millions of dollars, but, try to make something, build a little bit of a community here. I don't want to do anything flashy. I'm not trying to rage bait people or anything. I'm just out here being a junior in college. I'm just in my apartment dorm room telling you guys about fights and football, and it's the stuff that I love, and it's the stuff that I'm trying to do in my life. So, the people who are here listening, I appreciate you so much, and let's try and build a community out of this thing. I really do. I feel like I'm back from Christmas break. I'm here in Fullerton, and I'm just trying to, grow this podcast and really create a community and do something special with this. Because the way that it's been going, some of the support I've received has been great, and I think that if I stay on this content, this offsetting penalties thing, it could become something bigger. And if you are here till the end of the pod, there is another offsetting penalties on YouTube. If you see him, he does NFL content too. I'm coming after you. You will not win the war. I have the copyright to offsetting penalties, right? So I could, but I'm going to beat you. Fair and square, I'm going to beat you, and that's the end of it. So, sorry, ran over. Let's talk the rest of this week. Tomorrow, I'll be coming out with NFC Championship Sunday preview. We'll talk about Patriots, Broncos, Seahawks, Rams. Obviously, review those 2 games with Game Time Gresh next Monday. We'll review this card immediately after the fights on Saturday night. I'll go live. It won't be pre-recorded like this one is. I'll go live after the fights. We'll talk about the card. And I'm so excited. This is the best time of year. We've got UFC is back, the NFL season, championship Sunday, Super Bowl. This is, I think, the biggest 3 weeks of the Offsetting Penalties podcast, and I'm so excited for it. So I'm sorry I've been rambling a lot here at the end. If anyone is here till the end, like I said, I appreciate you so much. I'm signing off. I will see you guys. If you're an NFL fan, I'll see you tomorrow. If not, I will see you Saturday night after the fights. Later.